question portion. We begin with the chairman of the National Security Subcommittee, Mr. Grothman.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little bit different here when we kick off. I think collectively in Afghanistan, since I've been on this committee, we have had to have 7 or 8 hearings. And I always kind of view them through the prism, the answers I get through the prism of a guy who I had being my driver one summer, was a blue-collar guy, had spent 6 months in Afghanistan. And I asked him what he thought was going on in Afghanistan. He says, it's not going to end well. We shouldn't stay around. Maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't have. But he said they hate us. So here's this guy, 21-year-old guy, and then I come in here before these committee hearings, not the IG, but all the various agencies, and they're all confident how we're advancing and things are getting better and better, and the government's going to hold on for years and years. And I knew all along my 21-year-old guy, who spent 4 or 5 months there, knew a lot more than the high-level State Department people who were assuring us that everything was going well. Prior to delving into the more relevant questions, I'll just ask Ms. Shaw, and maybe this is not the IG to know this, but could you give us an opinion of where we find these State Department employees that seem so clueless about what's going on in the real world? Is there a way we could change the hiring practices? Are the universities that train these people so totally flawed or lacking in common sense? How do they get this so wrong when just an average guy, boots on the ground, so to speak, understood exactly what was going on?
So thank you for your question. I don't know that we have work specifically on that issue, although we do look in the context of contract oversight and monitoring and find that there are folks filling in these positions that lack the technical expertise, lack the experience, and so we do have some work that point to those issues, but on the broader question, I'm afraid I don't have an answer.
Yeah, okay. I'm not really worried about technical expertise. I'm worried about common sense, which seem to be entirely lacking. Ms. Anguilera, what ongoing programs are taking place in Afghanistan today?
Sure, thank you for your question. In FY22, USAID appropriated or spent $912 million in Afghanistan. Through Q1 and Q2 of FY23, it's about $599 million, and it's more heavily weighted towards humanitarian assistance, mostly food aid, and a very small portion of it, about $59 million in development funding, but mostly humanitarian food assistance.
Well, thank you. Are there any indications that with $900 million, is some of that going towards the goal of making sure that the people of Afghanistan no longer hate us?
I think the goal of getting food to people, there have been significant impediments to that in the last couple of months with the ban on women working for NGOs and most recently the UN. As of right now, the UN has halted much of its programming for humanitarian assistance, I believe until May 5th, while they decide how to continue implementing programming.
Okay, how does USAID ensure the assistance is not going to Taliban?
USAID has third-party monitoring and multi-tiered monitoring, and what we do as USAID is evaluate the type of monitoring they have in place right now.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Sopko. Today you're releasing your 2023 high-risk list that examines the ongoing risk to U.S. taxpayer dollars. What are the biggest risks that you've identified?
I think the biggest risk is the interference the Taliban has with the UN and Department of State and USAID programs. We do know that the UN has told us that they are siphoning money off. They're actually going beyond what the Ghani administration and stealing money from us. So that started. I think the second problem is that we have to rely on international trust funds, like the UN. We have identified in the past, over the last 12 years, that these trust funds, with the UN, World Bank, et cetera, do very little oversight and are very skimpy on giving information about it, and we think that's continuing, so we don't think state and aid. When we specifically asked, to give you an example, when we asked state, how much money is the Taliban getting from these programs, they couldn't answer because they don't know. So I can't tell you how much, but that's the biggest. The other serious threat to our assistance, I think, is the refusal of state and aid to answer the simplest oversight questions that we have, like who are your implementing partners? Can we interview them? We are not getting those answers back. So I would say the three biggest threats is the Taliban, it's the fact we're over-relying on these international institutions, which in the past have been horrible in providing us appropriate information. And the third thing is state and aide's abject refusal to allow oversight.
Can you just rattle off quickly one more time the international organizations that this body and, quite frankly, the press corps should know cannot really be trusted with taxpayer dollars?
Well, mainly it is a number of UN organizations we've identified in the past. You also have the World Food Program. You have something called the Colombo Plan, which the State Department specifically ordered not to talk to us when we were doing an audit of one of their programs on this. I think the World Bank is also involved. I would have to get you a further list of all the programs involved.
Thanks. Well, it's very illuminating. Thank you much for giving me another couple seconds.